All right, so maybe we'll get started. We have one kind of maybe who may still join us, but I can let them in as we get going. So welcome everyone. I think I know everyone here, but I'm Hope and Delia O'Brien from the Food Bank, and thank you to Doris Moore for doing this very popular workshop. I know she does it every year, and we very much appreciate that. Just a couple of quick things before we get started. We are recording this just so that Doris can share it out with other agencies as needed throughout the year. Everyone should be able to unmute as they'd like if they have questions, but if you're not actively speaking, just keep yourself on mute so we don't have the background noises. I'm going to do that shortly too, because my dogs are bound to bark at any minute now. And then I'm actually just going to ask everyone to quickly introduce themselves and just ask a quick question about how comfortable you are with grants, where you are in the grants process, maybe even if you can say like on a scale of 1 to 10, like how fearful of grants are you? So just something about where you are at the grants process. So I'm just gonna kind of call on each of you. Jean, could you unmute and just introduce yourself, your program, and a little bit about you and grants?
Oh. I'm Jean Michon. I run New Beginnings Meal Site in Woonsocket. I've been involved in feeding the underserved for 35 years. Where I am with grant writing, I'm like at a -10. I just write and pray. So far, it's worked really well.
Good.
That's great. Thank you. Cameron.
Hello, everyone. My name is Cameron Kedek. I work for Warwick Public Schools, and I have a little backpack pantry that services for Title I schools here in the city. And my boss is actually the head of federal grants for the city and the school department, but she's retiring soon. And I just thought this would be a wonderful opportunity to learn. You know, I'm constantly reaching out, trying to find grants for field trip money and the food pantry and just all sorts of things for the kids being in the school system. So I thought this would be a wonderful opportunity to learn from Boris and the rest of you at the food bank.
Thank you.
I'm just gonna add that, Cameron, I think at Oakland Beach PTO, we do a lot of healthy habits workshops and stuff with the kids there. And it's been, I know they did one where it was the parents and the kids, and then they separated and then came back together and cooked together. And it was such a successful project. And it's really exciting to know that there are places like yours where we can do such good like nutrition ed work.
Yes, I love healthy habits. I did it with my own children. I was a participant before I stepped into this role. And so I'm constantly reaching out to Melissa and her team and saying, when can we do it? And we piloted for you guys a virtual version, and I think it was successful. So I love everything that you guys do, and healthy habits is wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you. Ed.
Hello, I'm Ed Crowley. I'm the Director of Hunger Prevention
We can barely hear you, Ed. Can you turn your mic up or speak closer?
All right, come back to me. Hello?
We can hear you, but it's very slight.
All right, I'm just working on my volume, so I'm working on the settings.
You know what? We can go to Amanda, and then Ed, if that works, great. Otherwise, you can put it in the chat.
Yeah.
Your introduction. So, Amanda.
Hi, everyone. My name is Amanda. I'm the food safety coordinator here at the food banks. I'm sure you've all gotten my emails before, my phone calls. And I am also with Jean in the I don't know anything about grants, which is why I'm attending this workshop. It's just something I'm very curious about. And I'm really excited to be learning from you all today. So yeah, nice to meet everyone.
Yeah. And Jen Hazard, I know, is on. I don't know if she wanted to quickly introduce herself as well while she's here. Put her on the spot.
Sure, go right ahead. Hi, I'm Jennifer Hazard. I'm the Agency Services Department Coordinator, and you probably all registered with me. So welcome, and I'm here for backup in case anybody couldn't get in, but looks like everybody made it. So nice to see everybody.
Right. So, Ed, I don't know if you want to try again.
Yeah, I think I don't know why I'm having difficulties this time.
All right, you can use the chat if you want to let us know anything you want to share. But I could just say this is Ed from the Martin Luther King Center in Newport.
Sorry about that.
That's all right. And anyone can feel free to use the chat function throughout if they want to ask a question or anything. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Doris. I'm going to take myself off the screen and mute myself, but I am here in the background if anything comes up or anyone has any questions that I can help answer. All right, thank you, Doris.
Thanks, Hope. Thanks, Jen. So my name is Doris Moore. I am the grants manager at the food bank. I've been grants manager for almost 10 years. And before that, I wrote grants for a mental health organization for 7 years before that. So been doing this a long time. I think 17 years as a grant writer is probably pretty long for the field. It's changed a lot. When I first started grant writing, it was very much trial by fire. There was no training programs or anything like that. Now, apparently, you can actually major in and get a degree in grant writing and philanthropic management and that kind of stuff. So the field has really changed quite a bit. It used to a lot as well be that companies would just hire grant writers and grant writers were consultants and they would write grants, but depending on the organization, if you had a robust grants program, it made more sense to either hire someone in that position or, a lot of times it was the executive directors and that kind of stuff doing that. So the field has really changed quite a bit. And, actual grant writing has changed quite a bit as well over the years. I think part of it is that we've moved from a lot of paper applications to mostly online applications now. So with the advent of new technologies and that kind of thing, it's become pretty much automated and mostly online now rather than actually having to send and mail copies. So it used to be that you'd have to send 7 copies of all your grants or however many copies they wanted you to provide. So there was a lot of copying and collating and coordinating involved, but a lot of that has changed. So I really want this workshop to be interactive. So please, if you have questions, if you don't understand something, if it sparks a story, that's great. Just take yourselves off mute and you can interrupt at any time. I am basically going to give you an overview of, what kinds of grants are out there, how to find them, how to ask, and then also how to structure a proposal so that you can be as successful as possible when you're writing grants. Like I said, I want it to be really interactive. Usually when I do this at the food bank, we do a lot of writing, we do a lot of stopping and talking about, organizations and different things. So I know it's a little bit different on Zoom, but it would be great to be able to still have that sort of interactive piece because I eat, sleep, and breathe this every day. So, but you don't. So I could, I'm going to present the information, but I really want to be able to tailor it to your needs and what what the needs of your organization are. So like I said, this beginning grants workshop, I put this quote. This is how you do it. You sit down at the keyboard and you put one word after another until it's done. It's that easy and that hard. I always tell people that it's kind of like still being in college and writing college papers every day. There's a lot of research involved where you're integrating knowledge along with some program information and that kind of thing. So if you liked writing papers in college, this is the career for you. All right, so. Okay, so we're going to talk about where to begin, who to ask, what types of things you can ask for, and how do you ask. So I wanted to talk first about the types of funding that are out there because you're going to run into this as you start doing research. So there are three major basic types of funding. The first is capital funding. There are not that many organizations or funders in Rhode Island that provide capital funding, but you can find them. There's a couple that I think literally everyone who's a nonprofit in Rhode Island that needs capital funding asks these few foundations. So, and those are the two that come to my brain. First is Champlin, the Champlin Foundations, and then also Ocean State Charities Trust, which is a much smaller scale. But your capital items are basically anything that's kind of tangible, I say. So if you need a new building, if you need computers or technology, if you need to put a new roof on your building, if you need new flooring, if you need new ovens, those kinds of things are capital, are fall under the capital funding category. And usually it's a one-time type of purchase. You're not going to be purchasing it over and over again or asking the same funder to purchase the same thing over and over again. Food would not fall under capital purchases, just so you know. It's because it's a renewable, it doesn't fall under capital. That would fall under program. So we're going to talk about that. The next type of funding that's out there is general operating. So this is for anything like your staffing, utilities. Jean.
I have a question about the capital funding.
Yep.
Are those available on a yearly basis?
They are.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so Champlin Foundations, if you look them up, they have they just moved to a 2-cycle process throughout the year. And I believe I know that the second cycle is June 1st, but the first cycle I think was, I forget when it was due. I think somewhere in December, but you'd have to look that up. I'm not promising that's the right information. So yeah, so capital, a lot of times, you're asking for something different every year. And there are some other capital funders out there that also support general operating and or program. Just requires a little bit more research. I would say that 25% at the most of foundations cover capital. So it's a little bit more rare and harder to chase, but there are some good ones. So like I said, general operating funding is anything that from staffing to your utilities, your trash removal, your telephones, rent, all of that kind of stuff that falls under usually your program, your operating budgets that is not covered under program. The difference between general operating and program is really that you're going to have an overall organization budget, and you may have line items as your program budget. So let me try to put this in a more specific format. So you have your organization budget, which is everything that's included in your organization. So all your programs are probably listed under there. Like if you have a backpack program, you probably have that pulled out and all of the expenses for that listed separately. So, but on your operating budget, it may just say backpack program, and it might include everything from salaries to food to backpacks to transportation, whatever's included in there. All of your programs and that kind of, all of your programs help make up your general operating budget. So don't feel like you only have to ask for program budgets or for program supplies or for, funds for programming. A lot of times you can say that, and it doesn't have to necessarily say general operating, but you can say that you're going to be using the funds to support the efforts of your overall organization, or that you're supporting the city of Warwick at Oakland Beach for as a food pantry and nutrition education and all of those things that are included in there. So that's the difference between general operating and program. So program is part of your general operating budget. So your program budgets, these are the easiest things to ask for because they're so specific, and a lot of times they're for kids or for seniors, which are easier asks than asking for, staffing and rent and that kind of stuff. I put in here too that, sometimes I don't think anyone here is a faith-based organization. I'm not sure. Jean, are you guys? You're separate. Okay. So a lot of our member agencies, their food pantries fall under the operation of the church that they're attached to. And that becomes a little bit problematic because some funders don't want to fund faith-based organizations. However, they will fund the food pantry side of it. What becomes problematic is that a lot of times there's no separate budget. So I've been working a lot with some of those faith-based organizations to actually develop an organization budget that encompasses all of their work specifically, but doesn't include the rest of the church's expenses. So maybe you have a kids program, maybe you have a bag program, maybe you're working with seniors, maybe you're asking for food, which is part of a program. Those things, which are easier asks, obviously, would fall under program. Questions about the differences? Does it make sense? Okay. All right, so let's talk about the things that are not usually fundable. I put this in here because I get a lot of questions about this from our member agencies. So the first is that you definitely have to have a 501c3. If you're not a 501c3, there's probably 5% of funders out there that would fund a non-501c3. So it's not, there's just not many funders out there who do that. So it would severely limit the number of potential funders that you could have. Cameron, are you guys a separate 501c3?
So as soon as you said this, I said, this is my problem, because I go to contact Stop and Shop or whatever. My letterhead is Warwick Public School letterhead, but the pantry is supported by the PTO. And the PTO at Oakland Beach this year is non-existent because the members are homeschooling their kids, and I don't have any contact. What I need is them to be doing this work under their PTO. Right?
Yes.
So
yeah.
I'm in the office, I'm calling, I'm doing work, I'm reaching out. And then I think as soon as I send something, Stop and Shop is like, yeah, great, contact me. And as soon as they probably see the Warwick Public Schools, they're like, whatever, and they trash it and they never get back to me. Yeah. So I have a lot of frustration with this exact issue.
I'm sure you do. Yeah. And actually, I think somewhat saving is that Warwick Public Schools would be a 509 something or other, which is a public school. Some funders will consider both of those. But I definitely think having the PTO's 501c3 will really help you. And it's hard when you don't have that paperwork. Look around the office there. I feel like they should have that there listed somewhere filed.
Yeah, I'll check.
Even
I
if they
can-
have like an old grant file somewhere, maybe you could find one in there.
yeah.
So anyway, so as you can see, not having a 501c3, it becomes very problematic for trying to get funding. Even when you're asking local places like a Stop and Shop or like Lowe's for supplies and that kind of thing, a lot of times they want you to attach your 501c3 because they can then take that as a charitable donation. Without you having a 501c3, they cannot take a tax deduction on those. The other thing that is not typically funded is money for individual clients. So if you have a family that you love that's struggling, you cannot write a grant for them and give them money. I had a member agency call and ask me, some of their very long-time volunteers were struggling financially, and they were saying, well, can't we just write a grant because they're a volunteer? And I said, the only way you would be able to write a grant to help them is if they were an employee of yours and you were covering their salary under your grant program. But it still felt, I said to them too, I said, it still feels really creepy to me because, trying to sort of finagle people into that kind of position so that you can get money for them just doesn't feel good. So money for individual clients is usually a no-no. Any money for parties or fundraising, for lobbying, for those type of expenses are not usually fundable. That's not the same as a sponsorship. So sometimes you run across corporate organizations that will provide grants and or sponsorships. And that sponsorship is basically that you're providing them with some benefits in terms of like, you're going to hang a banner at your event, or you're going to, call them out on social media for your event, but it's usually an event specific. It could be a fundraising event, but it would have to be specifically as a sponsorship, not a grant. Money to get rid of debt that you've already incurred. Usually best practice is to say that you can't go backwards. So say you decide to buy a new stove and you say, oh, I'm going to just get grant funding for that. 9 times out of 10, they're not going to give you grant funding for something you've already purchased. And they're not all going to qualify for you because we are very, very different. We're a statewide organization. We're a multi-million-dollar organization. And we sort of like oversee the food safety net, whereas you guys are specifically located in these small pieces and places in Rhode Island. So some of them might be a little bit more difficult, but it is a good way to go.
Yeah, cap agencies in a local area is probably a better bet.
Yeah. And then the second type of foundation I wanted to point out was corporate foundations. So these are large corporations that have community giving programs. And I would say that probably nowadays, 8 out of 10 large corporations have community giving programs. So take a drive around Rhode Island or Google, corporations that are their headquarters are located in Rhode Island. So now you have CVS, you've got Amica, you've got MetLife, you've got all these different places. But even places like Walmart, they have a community giving program, and it's a local community grant program that anybody can apply to if you're a 501c3. And usually you're going to apply to the Walmart that's nearest to you. You can even go in and visit them and tell them that you're going to submit an application and that you would love their support. I always try to go sometimes well, not now because of COVID, but previously I went and spoke at their morning meetings about the food bank. And it really sort of garners a relationship that then when you ask for funding through the local grants program, they're like, oh, the food bank came here. Oh, we liked her. She did a great speech, whatever. We're going to give to them. So definitely some of those relationships can be good. You know, Lowe's and Home Depot, they're usually not a good thing. I'll just tell you up front because Home Depot usually focuses more on disaster relief and rebuilding after a disaster. And Lowe's, I'm not sure that they have a national like community giving program. It's usually like a store by store has a budget for that kind of thing. So you can always drop into your local Lowe's or your local Home Depot and, you know, plead your case and talk about, you know, things that you need. And sometimes they'll give that to you. Which I'm going to actually just grab that local needs one. I'll skip government for a second and talk about local needs, which are smaller items from local stores and donations. If you have capital needs that you need paint or you need school supplies, stuff like that, just go to your local Walmart, go to your local Staples, go to your local Lowe's, Home Depot, where Job Lot. Usually if you go in there, you talk to the manager, talk about your program, talk about what your needs are, and ask them for a donation of those things. A lot of times you walk out with a donation of something. And once again, you know, having your 501c3 letter is important. In addition to, sometimes they want you to format a letter on your letterhead that explains what it is that you need and what the donation will entail. But it's always good to either start with a phone call or go in and speak to somebody directly. There's not a lot of government grants out there, unfortunately, for food pantries and for food, not even for the food bank. The ones that I can think of that you guys would qualify for is, well, two things. You could check on city websites. Sometimes they do have specific funding for organizations that are located in that city or town. But the bigger ask and the bigger pool of money comes from the community block development grants. These are federal funds that come through each state and or through each city and town. In Rhode Island, they have town-specific community block development grants for Warwick, Pawtucket, Central Falls, Woonsocket, and Providence, I believe. The rest falls under a state of Rhode Island community block development grant. This is good actually too for capital funding and for repairs or different things to your repairs or things that you need to your building, or if you need a fence, that kind of thing. It's very political because this is Rhode Island and there are a lot of places competing for this funding. So it might be a question of like who you know and how you can sort of tap into those funds. And usually it falls under the mayor's office. But if you Google community block development grants for City of Providence or wherever you're located, it might pop up. For any other city in town besides those sort of core cities where there's a high need and a high level of poverty, the ones that I mentioned, there is an overall state one. And so you can apply to that, but just know that everyone in every other city in town is probably applying to that as well. So they're very competitive. If you get one, I'm going to hold a parade for you because they're very hard to get. And I mean, even, you know, even the food bank, we have not gotten one yet. Yeah, Jean.
Apply for both the city and the state?
No. So the way it works is that if your city or town has a CDBG program, it has their own funds, then you wouldn't qualify for the state one. So the state is basically like the rest of the cities and towns, excluding yours. Any questions about this stuff? Okay. So who do I ask? So I always say this, please realize that the Bill Gates Foundation is not going to fund you. I think sometimes we think, oh, this person is so much money and so much this, you know, we definitely would qualify for funding for this. Well, unfortunately, places like the Bill Gates Foundation, they're really like thinking on a global level rather than like a Rhode Island. Let's like, you know, if you pinpoint, so they're like global, not even United States, not even Rhode Island, not even Warwick. You know what I mean? So you're a small, tiny pin drop of effectiveness for money from someone like the Bill Gates Foundation. So, you know, they're trying to make sure that everyone in the world has potable water, and they're trying to make sure that, you know, people have access to education and things like that. It's not that they don't care about your food pantry. It's just that you're not sort of on their radar for funding. They're looking for something much bigger, something that they can say, we brought millions of gallons of water to X population. So, so just remember that you are small. Think locally, research local Rhode Island foundations. They really are your best bet. A lot of times you'll run into things that say, you know, they want you to be a national. So even if you're part of a PTO, they want you to be like the national PTO or, you know, that kind of thing. They want you to be a national chapter or a statewide chapter because they want a bigger reach. So it really is kind of who do you know? So what contacts does your board have? This is a really great way to sort of tap into some new foundations, especially if you have board members who are employees of those corporations. You can tap into their community giving. You've got someone who can provide you with a letter or who can email the person and say, hey, I you know, I am a board member on this organization's board, and they decided to submit an application, and I just want to let you know that I wholeheartedly approve of this and that I'm recommending them for a grant. So if you have people who are on your board of directors or even, you know, friends, family who sit on different corporations who are employed by those, it's good to sort of tap into those resources. One great thing is there is a website called GuideStar. So it's guidestar.org. You can create your own login and password. It's free. But it helps you research some of these foundations and see what types of things that they're funding. So, you know, if you're asking an organization for the first time, a funder for the first time, and you're asking them for $50,000 and they don't know you at all, it's not likely that they're just going to give you $50,000 because they don't know you. They don't know what you're going to do with their money, that kind of thing. So you really need to do research and figure out the best amount to ask for. And then also repeat funders. So if there are funders that have given in the past, even if it was 10 years ago, and you know, your grants program has sort of fallen by the wayside, they're still your best bet because they know who you are and they've heard your name before. So any repeat funders that you have out there, you definitely want to, you know, steward them and make sure that you're providing them with information, reports, all that kind of stuff, because they really are your best bet for additional funds. So I always say it's good to ask yourself, what do I do first? So think about, what do I need? Do I need program expenses? Do I need something capital? Do I need a computer? Do I need staffing? Identifying first what types of things you need, even if you're putting them in categories, can give you a good starting point. And then, why do you need it? You're going to want to explain this in your proposal. So thinking about why you need it and what benefit it will have to your organization, whether it's a new program, whether it's a computer, whether it's, I need money for my utilities, or else I'm not going to have any electricity, that kind of thing. How much will it cost? When do so let me just go back to how much will it cost really quick. It's important to know, not necessarily exact costs, but a pretty close to what it will be. You definitely need it to be, because you don't want to ask someone for $5,000 and then it turned out that it was actually $7,000, the item that you're asking for, or because then you've got $5,000, but you have nothing to do with it because you don't have that other $2,000. You can't go back to the funder and say, oh, sorry, I thought it was going to be 5,000, but it was actually 7,000. That never feels good. So definitely knowing how much things cost and getting quotes and that kind of thing is really important. And even if it's like your electric bill, if you want to average it or add it up over the year, try to get as close to an actual number as you can. When do I need it? Unfortunately, the grants process is not the quickest of ways to get money. So average is probably 3 to 4 months before you actually will hear and or receive the funding. I have some foundations that literally it takes them an entire year because they ask for a deadline and then they don't have a trustee meeting or a board meeting until the following year. So sometimes it can be a full year depending on the organization. Sometimes they're a little bit faster, but I would think on average it's 3 to 4 months. So if you need something next week, finding the funding through a grant is probably not your best bet. And then also, will you need more of it? So if you're asking for food, you're probably, once you've given that out, you're going to need more of it. So is it something that you're going to need to keep asking repeat funders, or is it just a one-time cost? I think that grant research and finding funders is kind of like speed dating. So I've actually never speed dated, but it sounds like it would be. So you're trying to find that perfect match. So a lot of it is research. You're trying to research who they fund, what types of things and how much do they fund? Where do they fund it? Is it a match, and when do they fund? So you're trying to sort of find that foundation. The foundation that matches you best is your most likely funder. And then, but this does require a lot of research. Like I said, the guidestar.org website is really great because it has all of their 990s, which is basically the tax return for nonprofit organizations and for foundations. So you can go into GuideStar, type in a foundation, and then you can pull their 990. And as you go through, you can see, it'll tell you how much money do they have in assets, how much money was contributed this year. So you can kind of see whether they have continuing capital coming in, or is it just that they had $15 million when they became a trustee and they're spending it down, or is there new money flowing in? You'll also be able to see who their trustees are. So maybe it's somebody that you know in Rhode Island, you just never know. You'll be able to also see it as you continue to like go through their 990. There is a place specifically for grant, for application information. So it'll tell you whether or not they only give, that they don't accept unsolicited applications, which is a checkbox that they put on their 990, or they'll provide you with the name and the address of the person to send it to, whether there are any limitations, geographic limitations, or restrictions for programs, or however they want to do that. And then also they might include some application information. So if it's not online, and even if it is, a lot of times they'll actually put the information, but they're like, send us a letter, or, you know, full proposal sent to X address or whatever. Include 501c3 and 990 or audit or whatever. And then if you keep scrolling almost to the very end, and some of them are like 100 pages, so some of them can be a little bit lengthy, but at the end, they will actually list how much money they gave out in grants, and then they'll also list the organizations, the amounts, and what specific item that they funded. So a lot of times it says general support, or it'll say, you know, we gave $5,000 to buy new books for the reading program, that kind of stuff. So you can actually look through and see, gee, do they fund organizations like mine? And if they do, what kinds of things are they funding? So if their average funding amount is $5,000, that's your sweet spot. You can ask them for $5,000. You're not going to ask them for $50,000 if their average is $5,000. And you know, if you see that they mostly give to program, even if it doesn't say it in their guidelines, you might actually sort of write your proposal for a program, because you see that they lean towards that. So even if in their guidelines it doesn't say we lean towards programs, the 990 can help you sort of determine and look at that. So like I said, it's a free website. Pretty much everyone is listed. Don't be scared when you see that the last 990 that they uploaded was from like 2019 or 2018. It takes a while for all the new ones to sort of get uploaded into GuideStar, but it'll give you a good starting place. So then the biggest thing is to look at, how do I apply? So like I said, a lot of applications are now online. It really is the new normal. For larger foundations, there's a lot of competition. You may need to apply more than once. I had a corporate foundation that literally I've applied to every year. And on my 6th year, I got funded, and now they're repeat funders. So don't think it's because, oh, I wrote a bad proposal, or, oh, they're not interested in that. It's just that there's a lot of competition and there's limited amount of money. So it could be that they had already promised half of their funds to organizations for 2nd year funding, and then they didn't have enough left to fund everybody that was asking for new applications. So don't be discouraged. Sometimes it does take years. And smaller foundations, the nice thing is that you can call to discuss the projects with them. So some of the smaller foundations, you know, I'll call or email and say, you know, hey, this year looks like our application timeline is coming up. Wanted to see what you were thinking about for, funding. Would you rather fund a program? Would you rather fund our, general support? In the past you funded this. We don't have that program anymore, but let me tell you about this program. There's a lot of ways that you can sort of contact smaller foundations and introduce yourselves to them. Especially for smaller foundations, they don't want to fund organizations that they've never heard of. So definitely trying to make contact with them is good. Even if they have an online process and they have a contact name listed, sometimes after I've submitted it, I'll say, dear so-and-so, just wanted to let you know that we just submitted an application for this. I know we're a new organization to you, and I just wanted to reach out and let you know that we submitted and see if you had any questions, whatever. It's just a way to make contact. And then actually we're going to move into writing the proposal. So let me ask first, are there any questions like more along the lines of finding new funders, or what kinds of foundations are out there? Any questions that you have for anything that I talked about already? Just let me know. Otherwise, we can move on to the next part, which will include some of that other information as well. Okay. So there's a couple of proposal types that I wanted to talk about. Like I said, the first one is online applications, which are used more and more. There is something called Cyber Grants Front Door now that you may come across. So basically, anyone that uses any foundation or organization that uses Cyber Grants as their grant platform, you can now access through one login, and it will basically show all of your all of those organizations and your applications. So if you find that you're using Cyber Grants a lot, then you might want to merge everything into your front door. As you go in, and I really honestly suggest that you keep a spreadsheet or write them down somewhere, because they're literally going to change every single time. So you're going to create a username and password and register for those, for online applications, specifically on each separate corporation or foundation funder. We submit well over 100 applications every year to various organizations. And literally, there's no way I would ever remember all of my username and passwords, because sometimes they want the front part of your username, but not your email. Sometimes they want a password to be, this many capitals and special characters and whatever. So make sure you're keeping track of your username and passwords, but don't be afraid to, what I did is I created a separate email for grants. We call it RICFB grants at foodbank, or RICFB grants at rifoodbank.org. So you could call it grants at warwickschoolspto.org or something. It's kind of nice because then everything is in one place, and then you kind of can use that as a central username and password as well. So just a thought. You're going to be uploading a lot of documents to these portals. So you want to make sure that you have things like your 501c3, your board of directors, your audits, any 990s you have in a PDF format, so that you can upload them into these sites. A lot of sites will not let you actually submit the application without those documents, and they want them as PDFs. So if you don't have the documents electronically, and I suggest printing them, taking them to Staples and saying, can you scan these for me and put them on this flash drive? It's important that you are able to upload those documents as PDFs. When you're actually writing those, my key trick is put it in Word first. Then you can review and edit and copy in. I can't tell you how many times, I mean, I hate to say this because I still do it. I've accidentally X'd out of the application on accident without saving it because I was closing another window and I just pushed the wrong X and I've lost my entire application. So I always put them in Word now, because then I can go back. If I accidentally X out, at least I have what I've written there and what I've already edited, so that I don't lose it. Because let me tell you, there's nothing more like demoralizing, I guess, than having to rewrite something that you've already written and you're trying to recapture what you wrote. And especially if you really liked what you wrote, you're like, oh, it's just never going to come back in that way. So definitely putting it in Word and then reviewing it and copying it into the online application is the way to go. And definitely on the online applications, follow directions, character limits, uploads, the way they want things formatted. I think that 65% of grant writing is following directions, because, you know, they'll have like in 250 characters, do this. And if you go over that, it basically just cuts you off. So you definitely have to look at character limits, what kinds of uploads. So sometimes they want everything in a PDF, or they want everything in Excel or Word or whatever. Sometimes they have some kookier uploading requirements. And then how things are formatted. So they may say, you know, we want your budget to say, you know, income, revenue, expenses, and then please under that list your current funders or whatever. So sometimes you have to sort of like take a couple documents and merge them into one, or change a certain document. So if you have a way to create your own PDFs, it's definitely the way to go, so that you can do some editing. If it's a paper application that they're asking you to, I beg of you, dear God, I beg, never, ever, ever handwrite your application. I'm telling you right now, it will go in the trash. So sometimes they'll, you know, a few foundations, and I can think of at least 10 that still send me paper applications. Or, you know, it's like they say, download the application here, but then there's no way to, it's just a PDF. So, you know, a lot of people don't have the capability of actually typing into a PDF. So it just means that you, if you can't type into the application, just recreate it in Word and make it look like what they look like their application. I do that all the time. And like I said, make sure you follow their questions and formats exactly and follow their page limits. It really does matter. I think that part of it, of getting awarded something, is that you actually followed the directions, whereas a lot of people didn't. But anyway, please just never handwrite them. I still, to this day, I can't believe that people actually do that, but they do. Okay, so special cases. There are a few foundations who also want a letter of inquiry. So if they're asking for an LOI, some foundations use this process to weed out the competition. So it's a shorter version of the application. It's not as much detail. It's more of an overview of your program and what your ask is going to be. Santander just moved to this process. And so basically, generally, you're submitting it online. Sometimes they want you just to send a letter, but for the most part, the ones I can think of, they're all online. And basically what you do is you submit it and then you have to wait for them to approve it and ask you to submit a full proposal. The full proposal has to be the same project. You cannot change it halfway through. Even if you got, say you submitted an LOI for children's programming that you have, and then in between the letter of inquiry process and the full proposal, you got funded for that from a different funder. You would need to go back to the funder that you submitted the LOI that approved you, and let them know that that was the case and ask them if you could change it. Most likely the answer is going to be no. So just be aware when you're double and triple asking different foundations that you could run into a difficulty if you already secured the funding through another funder, but then this particular funder approved the same thing. And let's talk about that for a minute. So in the grants world, you have to be specific about what you're asking for. If it's general operating, don't worry about it. But if you have a children's program and your budget is $20,000, so you've asked maybe 5 different people for $5,000. Now you have succeeded in getting all of the funds that you need for that. It can be difficult because if you're then funded by a foundation for, sorry, somebody is at my door. Hold on. So if you're funded for a foundation for a specific program or project, you have to use that funding for that. You can't then just apply it to your senior program. There are lots of ways to solve that problem. Sometimes I've actually gone back to the funder and said, hey, listen, this quote came in a lot less than we anticipated. We were able to get a coupon, whatever. So now I have $2,000 left. May I use that funding for XYZ? And you have to get permission to do that, because when you're being audited, or if your grant is then going to be audited, then you have to be able to show that you got permission to use that. You cannot just take funds that you got for your children's program and buy a stove with it. Whatever you've secured those grant funds for, you need to use that for what you wrote it and got approved for. Just putting that out there. And then do not solicits. So like I said before, there is a checkbox on the 990 that says that it shows whether or not that foundation accepts unsolicited applications. The reason that they say this is that some of these funds, the foundation either chooses or has already committed funds to organizations. So they're probably not going to have a website, and you can sort of just move them to the side, because 90% of the time they're not going, even if you send them a letter like, hey, just wanted to introduce myself, and I've tried this before, it doesn't work. Introducing yourself and asking them to consider including you in their funding plans. Most times the foundation already has specific interests or specific organizations that they've committed their funds to, and so they're not going to be adding. So if you come across that checked box on their 990, or even on their website that says that they're not accepting unsolicited applications, just pass them by. It's very difficult to get funds out of those types of things. And then I wanted to just go through some donor advised funds and what that is. So donor advised funds is similar to those family philanthropy funds. So someone has set up a fund, it's being managed through the Rhode Island Foundation, through banks. It could be Citizens, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, could be other community foundations. I put the New Jersey Community Foundation in here because it sounds like, wow, wouldn't they just give to New Jersey? But sometimes they spread out and have other interests that they give to. These types of funds are usually you're applying through this particular platform. So you would apply on the Rhode Island Foundation application for that particular fund. Citizens, they may be managing a particular fund and you're going to actually submit the application through Citizens Private Wealth Management. Same thing for Wells Fargo, same thing for Bank of America. So Bank of America is probably one of the bigger philanthropic management organizations. So if you Google Bank of America Philanthropic Management, you can actually see an entire list of organizations and foundations. And then if you tailor it further, it'll show the ones that just give to Rhode Island. So that's another way to sort of find some of those funds that are not going to necessarily show up in your research. Okay, so what if there is no formal application? So this is becoming less and less, like I said, but it still does happen. It still does happen. So if on their 990, it says send a letter or something like that, you want to draft a letter with the information. I wouldn't make it any more than 2 pages if they're asking for a letter. Put on their letterhead, put it on your letterhead and have it signed, which is really important. So a lot of times, member agencies will say to me, oh, I want to just send a letter, or, oh, I want to, submit this, this application. And I always say to them, make sure it's on your letterhead and that it's signed by your executive director. The reason that this is important is because they want to make sure that you are authorized to submit in a grant application on behalf of the organization that you're working for. So it also puts some legitimacy behind it when it's on your letterhead. So that's why I always say, put it on your letterhead and have it signed by your executive director. They also might say, send us a letter of inquiry. That's if there's no formal online letter of inquiry, then you can use this format to send the LOI. If they say, send us an application, I put on here, use your template application, because I'm going to walk you through how to develop that. And then you can tailor for what you're asking for as you go and make sure you're following directions. It used to be that it was like everything had to be in Times New Roman, 12 margins set at such and such. It's not quite so bad anymore, but I still run across, there's one specific foundation I can think of that makes me, in my narrative proposal, they make you double space. And I absolutely hate it because it looks terrible. I just want to, I want to like change it, but then anyways. So definitely if they tell you to double space it, double space it. Always, always, always follow directions. I really honestly cannot reiterate how important this is. And I think that there are a lot of foundations that have a guideline checklist that they ask you to either fill out and include, or that they provide to you. Those things are really important. You want to make sure you have everything that they have asked for. Check your spelling and grammar. It really does make a difference. It's the same thing as like submitting a resume with spelling errors or grammatical errors. A lot of times people will just throw them away because it reflects on you, it reflects on your organization, and it reflects on how business-like, quote unquote, that you are. Probably shouldn't count as much as it does, but it really does. So make sure you have someone who can proof, someone more than just you. Once you've sort of written something and you've read through it a couple of times, your eyes will just go right over the top of things. So it's always good to proof. If you're sending a proposal via mail, attach a cover letter on your letterhead and with your executive director's signature. So we talked about that before, about why that's important. And then follow deadlines. They really honestly do not want to, they really will not take it after the date that it's due. So hang on, I just have a couple things in the chat. So Cameron has to leave. That's totally fine. I will send you the recording. And then he noted that Kami, Kami, is an app that allows you to edit PDFs, which may be helpful for some people. So
yeah, I use that a lot. You can put text boxes right on top of it. So that's how you would fill in everything on the PDF and fill out your paperwork. Great. So that's a really helpful application. Thank you so much.
Yeah, that's great. Because I know, some of the PDF writing software and stuff can be expensive. So anything free is good. Okay, so let's talk about a proposal. I find it really helpful and really important to create something called a template application. Basically what it is that you're going to, and I'm sorry, I emailed you guys a grant writing worksheet. So this is basically walking you through this process, because as you start to build your grants program and you're submitting more and more and more, if you have to rewrite everything all over again, or go and search for this particular language you had, actually have a Word document that I throw paragraphs into. I call it grant language I'm always looking for things that not necessarily asked all the time, but that are frequent enough that I don't want to rewrite it. I just want to go get that paragraph and throw it in there. So I encourage everyone to try to put together a application template, and really it will help you in the future, especially if like you have an entire organization description and then they tell you at one application they want 1,000 characters, another application could be 2,000 characters. It's so much easier just to be able to take that information that you've already written and then edit it down, rather than trying to rewrite, and really will cut down on time if you have a template. So what kinds of things are you going to put in your template? The first thing I want to remind you is that they don't know your story and they don't know you. So this is the perfect way to tell your story and to introduce yourself to them. So your proposal template should include the following. So an organization description, and I say it should be between 1 and 2 pages at the most. A funding request, which is 1 to 2 sentences. A statement of need, which can be up to a page. A program description, which is 1 to 2 pages. And then evaluation and methods, which is another page. So if they tell you to submit a paper application, you basically have your entire funding proposal already written if you've written an application template. And so the grant writing worksheet that I sent you, so it's basically divided up by each of these sections. And then also within that, there are different pieces that you need to include. So we're going to go through each one of these. Usually if we're at the food bank, the workshop is actually an hour longer, and we try to do some writing and we try to get some of this done. But I'm going to leave you to do that separately. And then if you want me to look at things, or you have questions, or you want me just to read something, I am totally happy to do that and available. So just so you know, as we go through. So the first is the organization description. This is your story. This is who you are. And so definitely feel free to tell it. So it should include your mission and vision, how your organization started and when, why you are an organization, why you decided to become an organization, what was there a need in the community that wasn't being met, how did your organization fulfill this need, and how have you grown and expanded? How have you used your position in the community to tackle other needs or reach other populations? So included in this would be like what kind of population you're serving. And this, I think if you, on the grant writing worksheet, if you wrote your mission and vision, how and when your organization started, you can start taking these sentences and actually building an organization description. If you've been incorporated for a while, that's awesome. So, the food bank is almost 40 years in business. So we mention that a lot because these longstanding organizations demonstrate to the funder that you have longevity, that you're able to sustain your programs because you're still here after X number of years. And just shows that you're a part of the community. So, and then why? What was that need? Whether you're local or statewide, where are you located and what areas do your services cover? What kind of organization structure do you have? So number of staff, board members, their involvement. I include that a little bit in there, but each of these things could be, 1 sentence to 5 sentences to 10 sentences. So answering these questions will help you really develop this organization description. And then you can move things around and whatever so that it makes sense. So usually I put, our background first. So for more than 40 years, the food bank has, provided basic human needs to people in Rhode Island through food assistance, and then talk about what we do. So we act as a food distribution warehouse, soliciting, collecting, and storing donated, surplus, and salvageable food for people in need. So that's 3 sentences. And basically I have covered when we started, why, and what our core business does. So then I put our mission and vision, and then I talk about our programs. So did I put that in here? Let me just look. Nope. Okay. So in your organization description, you're going to include all the separate programs that you have as well. So that's why I gave you 1 to 2 pages. I said, you're not going to necessarily include all of that every time, because for a lot of the online applications, the character limits are about 2,000 characters. So it's probably 5 paragraphs tops. So you want to, but you want to call out all of your information. So if you can try to write your organization, I say just write it out as much as you want and as much information as you can think of, and then take the key core parts to create something that's like a 2,000 character limit. That will help you sort of pare down that information. So you want to make sure you're including, your core business, core what you do, your mission and vision, and then talk about some of your programs. Not lengthy, just, it could say Kids Cafe is an after school meal program for school age children. Healthy Habits is a nutrition education program that teaches clients how to shop, cook, and eat healthy food on a limited budget. So those can be bullet points for some of that. So it could, excuse me, it could be, for the Oakland Beach PTO, we're a food pantry. We offer nutrition education. We have a backpack program. So what information can you provide in that small section that just you're giving somebody an overview of who you are? Questions about this one? Okay, so the next piece of it is your funding request. It's really a statement telling them how much and what for. So my sample is the Rhode Island Community Food Bank respectfully requests $20,000 from the ABC Foundation to help meet the increased need for food assistance during the pandemic. Boom. That is your ask. A lot of times, like if I'm putting it just into my template proposal to send, I'll actually bold that so that it's calling out and saying, here's what we're asking for, because they may have 100 of these like 10-page proposals, and they just want to be able to find the information quickly, and then they can read more into it. So your funding request is basically telling them what you're asking for and what you would use the funds for. So it could be the New Beginnings requests $20,000 from whatever foundation to feed or to provide meals to 5,000 people every day or something like that. Okay. And then next comes your statement of need. So this is where you can be a little more like pulling on the heartstrings kind of thing. This is where you're going to include a lot of your research. This is where you can be a little bit more emotional, quote unquote. So what are you asking money for and why? What need is it going to fulfill? What overall changes and problems will it solve? How many people will it impact? And then numbers, your stats, your information. So you want to build your case here. So, if, let's say you have let's use the Oakland PTO backpack food pantry. So, many kids are going to school and they're not receiving food, or many kids are eating school nutrition programs, but then when they go home, there's no food until breakfast the next day at schools. And so, we would like to provide a backpack to these people, to these children, to ensure that they have the food they need to grow and thrive. So, in that you may say there are 5,000 children attending the Oakland Beach Elementary School from ages, 5 to whatever that is. And, Oakland Beach is one of the higher poverty sections of Warwick, and, X number of kids qualify for free or reduced price lunches. So you're telling the story and providing details and stats as you're going. So you're going to talk about the population that you're serving. You're going to talk about, kids going hungry, or seniors not having the food they need, or whatever the case may be. I'll just grab a sip of water. So yes, Jean.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Should you ever write about partnerships with other agencies?
Yes. A lot of online applications are now asking for that information. I would say that you could either include it in your program description if it's program specific. Do you know what I mean? So like if it's that you're partnering with Farm Fresh Rhode Island to get produce for that, to bring meals, you would include that probably in your program description. But yes, a lot of online applications are now asking for that information as well. And like I said, you could say too, we partner with the food bank to secure food and receive food from the USDA, from, different places. And, this partnership enables us to secure enough food for the community that we're in. And without the food bank, we wouldn't be able to afford it as much food or whatever that may be. But this statement of need is really you talking about the population, you talking about the problem that's out there and what your function is to help solve some of this problem. So let's get into the program description. So if you are writing for general operating support, your program description may be more information about your core function. So in Jean's case, it might be that you talk more specifically about the daily meals. We develop the menus this way, that kind of thing. If you have a senior program that's specific and you're asking for that senior program, then you could get more specific about that program here. So you're going to do same thing. I feel like sometimes like this is like 5th grade essay writing. So you're going to do who, what, when, where, and then evaluation. And I never used to do the evaluation piece about 3 or 4 years ago. I added this section because I saw that many applications were asking, and funders were becoming more particular about the evaluation piece of it. So those are your outcomes, and we'll talk about that as we go. So so you're going to talk about the population affected by the program, tie it into your statement of need, the number of people you're going to serve, whether there's any specific ages or ethnic composition, et cetera. So you may talk about all the children of Warwick or all the children at the that are taking part in the pantry at the Warwick PTO. And then you might talk about, we serve X number of kids every day, providing them with, a backpack. These kids are generally between X age and X age. So even though like at an elementary school, you may have ages 5 through 10, maybe you see that for the most part, it's the 5-year-olds who need backpacks, or for the most part, it's kids living in a specific neighborhood, or I feel like there's just many options that can go along with this. But so basically, you're going to take your statement of need and just filter it down a little bit more, pinpoint it a little bit more to be specific about the people that you're going to be serving. So maybe there are 5,000 kids attending Warwick Neck PTO, but you're serving 500 of them every day. So you can talk about that. So you're basically taking a larger subsection and bringing it down to pinpoint who exactly you're serving. Does that make sense? Okay. And then what are you going to do? So what are your specific goals and objectives? Describe the process, any specific activities, if you have particular staffing that you're going to use. So, an example for our Kids Cafe program that we have at the food bank, our specific goals are to provide evening meals to X number of kids a day, and provide nutrition education to each of these kids once every other month. It may be that we're going to create a certain number of meals every day, and that includes, menu planning and cooking and actually transporting meals. So any specific activities that you have. If you're asking for capital funding and you're going to put in a fence, great. What's the process? Does the torn down before you put the new fence in? And then do you have to go get a permit from the city, and then you have to hire the company or put them out to bid? So you're basically just talking about specifics about what you're going to do. So if it's a backpack program, it may be we're going to secure the food from wherever you're going to get the food from. And then, we have a core group of 10 volunteers who come in and pack the backpacks. Backpacks get set up, the food is put in. We include this other information in the backpack, and then children come after school and, or their parents register them, and then they come after school and they get their backpack. And the executive director checks off their name as they take their backpack. Whatever those activities in specifics that you have is where you want to put in the what. So it should be that if I don't know anything about the organization or the program, I can get a really good picture of what it is you're going to do, so that I can look and say, okay, I'm going to give you $5,000. I know you're going to reach kids. I know you're going to do these particular activities. I can see it in my head how the whole thing will sort of be enacted and be able to see the process in my head, so that even if I've never been to your site, I can sort of get a picture of what it is that you're talking about. And then the time frame. So some people go by fiscal years, some people go by calendar years. How much time is needed to complete the activities? If it's really specific and sort of complicated, you could break the activities down by month or quarter or half year, whatever that works. Usually your grants give you a year to complete the project. So unless you have said, we want to put in a fence in the next 4 months, you can assume that you have a year from when you receive the funds to complete the project. And whether, sometimes you're saying, we're going to use it during our fiscal year or during this calendar year. And that's okay too. They just want to know that it's not going to take you 3 years to complete the project, that you can see the start and finish of it. And like I said, if it's a program that you have that just goes every year, just use your fiscal year or use your calendar year, whatever you go by. Does that make sense? Okay. And then where will the program take place? So how will people access your program? What hours are available? You don't always have to include all of this, but if you're making a template, include it because you may need it someday. So if your program will take place in the cafeteria of a school and you're located in the building next to the school, you can talk about that. How will people access your program? Well, we take the backpacks to the cafeteria and hand them out from 3:45 to 4:45 or something like that. So you just want to give them a picture. Like I said, you're really just painting them a picture of what your program looks like. The more details you add and the more specific you are, demonstrates to them that you have thought out this program and that it's not just that you're like, well, we think we're going to hand out backpacks and we think that people are going to come. It shows that you have a plan in place to actually accomplish what you're trying to do. And then, like I said, I've added this evaluation piece about 3 or 4 years ago because a lot of places now are starting to look for outputs and metrics, which sounds like scary words. It really does. But it's basically like, how are you going to determine your success? So if your goal is to feed 50 kids a day, then that's an output that they can then use to demonstrate success. So if you say you're going to feed 50 kids a day and you end up feeding 60 kids a day, then you've already accomplished your goals, but you've overshot them. So it demonstrates to them that you are successful. So they want sort of those tangible kind of outputs and metrics, which I think I put, I was like, I think I put another slide. So what will you measure to determine your success? So whether that's number of kids served, number of pounds distributed, number of meals provided, anything that can actually have that tangible number that's attached to it that they can then say, hey, with our funding, we fed over 50 kids a day. You know what I mean? And tie it back to your objectives and goals. So if your objective is to feed children at Warwick, at Oakland Beach School, then you could say 50 kids at Oakland Beach School we fed every day, blah, 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 whatever that is. So you're tying it back and you're basically making out, you're creating outcomes for your goals. And then what will you use to measure that? Whether you, so for a couple of our programs, we've actually developed surveys to sort of determine changes in knowledge or determine changes in behavior. Not everyone is going to do that. I know we do that for our Healthy Habits program. So we use surveys, but not everyone is going to use a survey. It could be something as simple as stuff you're already tracking. So the number served, how many pounds of food, what types of food, you can determine what the best ways to measure these outputs are going to be. And then how will you use that to determine your next steps? So if you're consistently feeding 60 kids rather than 50 kids, maybe you expand the program to 70 kids. How will it determine your next steps? If you've only gotten 20 kids to go and get the backpacks and you planned for 50, how do you get those other kids to participate? And the nice thing is because you have those outputs and you have those measures, it will help you sort of look and see, what do I need to do next? How can I continue to solve this problem? Or can I replicate this at another site? And then how often are you going to gather the data? So, whether it's weekly, monthly, bi-monthly, and then who will see the results? So I put this in here because several applications that I can think of ask me questions like, how am I going to, how will the food bank share and raise awareness about programming? And then also, how will the food bank share and raise awareness about the success of these particular programs? Kind of makes me nuts because it's a really stupid question. And part of it is that it's like, who's going to see the results? I'm not doing a research study. So I'm not sharing this, whatever, but okay, fine. We'll put it in a newsletter that, we'll put it in our annual report that we fed 50 kids a day. Maybe, we'll share the results with our funders through annual reports or something like that. So I just don't want you to be surprised by this question, because it can be a little bit complicated to sort of figure out, because it's not like you're going to advertise and say, hey, we did this, I think nonprofits are more quiet about their successes. Maybe you're going to post it on your website or whatever. I don't know. But if you come across that and you come up with a good answer, let me know. So that's your basic proposal. That's how you're going to build your template. Like I said, that grant writing worksheet that I provided to you is, I think, probably a helpful way to sort of organize your thoughts and to make sure you've answered all of the questions. It doesn't mean you're necessarily going to use that language in every single application, but it'll give you a sense of, how do I talk about my organization? How do I create and develop these goals? And what information specifically do foundations think is important? And if you write it ahead of time, I'm telling you, I've walked so many people through this process, but really creating a template and sharing it with your executive director, talking it through and saying, this is the information that we want to communicate to funders. It really is an invaluable tool that you can then use moving forward. You add a new program, you know what you need to draw up to talk through the program with new funders. It'll give you that experience of writing something in a way that's targeted to receiving funds. Okay. So what else do I include in my proposal? So a lot of times they'll give you a list, or they'll have an attachments page on their online application, and it'll tell you what to upload. But for the most part, these are the most common things that they ask for. So definitely your 501c3 documentation. If they don't provide you with any, or if they just say send a letter or send a proposal or whatever, always include your 501c3 documentation at the very least, if they don't ask you to send anything. Your annual organization budget, a project budget if it's specific, and we're going to talk about budgets in a few minutes. A list of your board of directors, your most recent 990, your most recent audit. Sometimes they'll ask for one or the other. Sometimes they'll ask for both. Brochures, annual reports, whatever you have that just sort of talks a little bit more about the program or gives them a better picture of your organization. Okay, so let's talk about budgets. And the reason I do this too is because a lot of times I've run into member agencies that don't have budgets. This happens frequently, especially for faith-based organizations or organizations that fall under a larger umbrella organization. Or maybe you just you've never made an organization budget. So I call this revenue versus expenses. So basically what you're going to include in your organization budget is any revenue that your organization receives, whether you have some government funds, grants, organization contributions. So if you secure a grant from a corporation, that it gets included in grants, not organization contributions. If you receive a check from ABC organization, just randomly, or because you know somebody, or because you were raising funds through something, that goes as an organization contribution. Any individual donors that you have, any revenue you might have. So if you have a thrift shop or you have other things, then any special events that you had, any of that, then you would put that as your revenue side. All right, and then in expenses, let me just look in this chat. I just want to make sure that there's not a, okay. And then in the expenses side, so you want to include any salaries and benefits that you're providing, utilities, food expenses, mileage, any administration fees like taxes or bank fees, insurance, that kind of stuff, and program expenses. So you're basically giving them a picture, a financial picture of your organization. And it does not have to equal each other. A lot of times people are running behind or running ahead. It just gives them an idea of what kinds of revenue you're receiving, and then also what kinds of expenses you're incurring. And then, so that's your organization budget. It's just an overview of your entire organization. But then you may also need to create a project budget. And this is a little bit different. So if you're asking specifically for backpacks or for a senior program or just for food for meals for people, you're going to include your income. So what money you already have, whether there are any pending requests out there, you might include their request as a pending request. And then any expenses. So this is, I kind of break this out. It's a little bit complicated, but I'm trying to give you an overview of how to actually accomplish this. So in your expenses, staffing is probably the most difficult piece of it. So everyone knows most member agencies do not have the resources to have specific employees for specific programs. So maybe your executive director is the one who's packing the bags, or your program coordinator spends half their time packing bags and half their time's on the senior program. So the way to calculate staffing for each specific project is that you have your hourly, if it's an hourly staff person, you're going to include their hourly rate times the number of hours a week times the year, so times 52 weeks, to get that salary amount that's specifically dedicated to the particular project. Okay, so if you're asking for the senior piece of it, you're not asking for the entire staff person's salary, because half of their time is packing bags. So if if that hourly staff spends 10 hours a week on the senior program, and that's the money you're asking for, you can't ask for their whole salary because they're not dedicated to the senior program the entire time. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's hourly staff. They're easy. Salaried staff is a little bit different because they don't have an hourly rate necessarily. So what you do is instead you use their percentage of time that they're allocated. So if they're taking 10 hours a week out of their 40 hours a week, that's a quarter of the time. So it could be 25% of their time is then allocated to the project, and their salary is $44,000, let's say. then you would take that 44,000 and take a quarter of it. And that is your staffing number, quote unquote, for the time allocated specifically to the senior program. Does that make sense? Okay. So that was the most complicated part of your project budget, thankfully. And then you're going to include everything else. So fringe, if you have fringe benefits that you're including in your project budget, then you would calculate it the same way. Supplies, you could itemize that with amounts. It doesn't have to be like paper, but it can be if you know, backpacks, printing and copying, food, that might be some of the supplies that you have. Maybe you're giving boxes of food to seniors. So you can say food boxes for seniors costs X number a box. But you don't have to get crazy specific, like the pens that we include in the box and the this, you know, like it doesn't have to be like crazy specific that every item is listed separately. And then any utilities. So maybe you want to, because it's part of your operating budget, maybe you want to use some of that for utilities. So maybe you have a specific refrigerator that's used specifically for senior food. You could charge off the electricity used, quote unquote, for that senior program. How you would calculate that, I have no idea. You'd have to kind of like look around and divide things up, I guess, but you could, if you needed to cover some utilities that are specifically for programs, you could use that. And then any travel reimbursement rates. I have 52 cents a mile in here, but I think it's actually 58 cents a mile right now. It's a federal number that's provided, so you can actually just look it up online. But that's how you calculate mileage. If you're, say you have somebody who goes and delivers senior boxes to a senior high-rise building or something, and they have to travel 10 miles each way. So you're going to repay them for that gas and wear and tear on their car. And that number is set by the government. So those are project budgets. So a lot of times if you're asking for a program, you need to have both your org budget and your project budget, because it helps break out the expenses and shows funders where you're going to allocate the funds to. So sometimes you have to even be even more specific. So if my expenses total $20,000 and I'm asking for $5,000, I may want to put all that towards salary and staff. I may want to put it all towards supplies. Maybe I have another funder who doesn't want to fund staff, but would fund supplies or travel. So you kind of have to play around a little bit with it as you get funders for those specific programs about where you're going to allocate those funds to. And then capital budgets are a little tiny bit different. So I always say for creating a capital budget, include a description, include the amount of the item that you're looking for. It's always good to include a photo of what you're replacing, especially if it looks really old. Include a photo of what you want to buy, and then include if anybody else is going to be providing funding. So if your old stove has dents and whatever in it, take a picture of it and send it, and then show them the new stove that you want with the price on it. That way they can see exactly what it is that you're looking for. Questions on budgets? I think it's just Jean and Amanda now. Everybody else had to go. So any follow-up, I think I have 2 slides left. So once you've submitted your application, if you're submitting it online, usually they'll email you a receipt, so you don't need to call or email them. Once you submit some of the other applications, if you're submitting, you can, you can call and let them know you sent it, or email and find out when a funding decision might be made if there are no guidelines listed. And if you don't hear anything, certainly call or email them. A lot of times I'll email and say, hi, we submitted an application back in January, and I haven't heard anything yet, and just wondered if a funding decision had been made. Sometimes it's that I just never received the denial letter, or sometimes they just they're behind or whatever, but it's a way to communicate with them and let them know that you're still looking for their proposal and their proposal decision. If you want to, and they're willing to provide it, if your proposal wasn't funded, you could ask for feedback. It may be that they just didn't have enough money, or that, they thought you didn't have enough revenue, or they didn't like something about your application or whatever. So sometimes you can get that feedback, and it's really nice to have so that you can improve your application and avoid some of those pitfalls in the future. And if you get the grant, which is awesome, everyone does their happy dance when that happens, call and say thank you, or email and say thank you. Invite people in for a tour. Hey, you want to come see our new stove when it's ready? That kind of thing. The other thing you need to do is send a letter of acknowledgement and a thank you for their files. Most of them need it for tax purposes, but saying thank you and letting them know how much their support means to you is invaluable. You want to make sure you're stewarding them too, because if you want to ask them again for money ever again, you need to make sure you're keeping and sort of stewarding that relationship. So whether you send them newsletters or annual reports, sometimes recently we had a couple of articles come out in the New York Times about the way food banks are struggling. So I sent it off to a couple of my funders that I hadn't heard from in a little bit, just to stay in touch. And then someone was like, hey, here's $10,000. I'm like, great, fantastic. Thank you so much. So it's really a valuable way of keeping in contact with people and letting them know that their funding means a lot to you. And if they want a grant report, make sure you submit it on time. I had a funder yesterday on the phone who said to me, she's like, we've gotten a ton of proposals, but we would absolutely entertain a proposal from the food bank because you gave us our grant report in such a timely way that we were able to, we didn't have to chase you down and whatever. And I'm like, who doesn't submit their grant reports by the time that they're supposed to? But apparently people don't, and it really does make a difference in getting new funding. So if no report is due, sometimes I'll send them like an impact report that we do, or I'll summarize my annual activities and my next grant request to them. So I'll actually put a paragraph in that says, last year you guys funded this amount, and we were really able to increase the amount of food we were able to distribute by X, whatever that is. Let them know what you've been doing and how you spent their money. They want to know that their money is making a difference. And if you're looking for someone to give you money again, which we all are, it's a really good way to sort of create that relationship and keep that relationship on a good level. And then I think this is my last slide, resources for finding funders. So Google foundations that give to Rhode Island. If you have money that you could do like a monthly subscription, it's really expensive, but the Foundation Center it'll create a list for you and give you information about foundations that are out there. Trust departments at banks, so Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Citizens, any 990 searches, so guidestar.org is really your way to go. And then don't forget about local organizations and groups like the Jaycees, Lions Clubs, Kiwanis, Masons, Rotary Clubs, Knights of Columbus, Chamber of Commerce. Even if you don't necessarily agree with their whatever their beliefs are or whatever, if they have money, it doesn't matter. So a lot of them have, they give out scholarships, they give out grants to different places. So if you know somebody who's a part of one of these clubs, go for it. See if you can get money out of them. Jean, did you get it?
I'm a Rotarian and I've gotten money. They like me, so they keep giving me money.
It's awesome. It's awesome. Listen, this year, I think I raised somewhere around $3.2 million for the food bank. And really, it's not through just me. It's, there's a lot of coordination that goes along with that. But I don't care. Like $1,000 is $1,000. $100 is $100. Any kind of money is just getting us that much further towards our goal and getting us that much more food that we can provide to people in need. So, I don't mind filling out applications if it's just for $500 or just for $1,000.
$500 more than we
care.
had.
I don't turn down money from anywhere. So yeah, and once again, like if you get your template written, it makes things, it makes things a lot easier to turn around and say, oh, I'd like $500 for this, or somebody wants to give you a $250 grant or whatever. It makes it easier to write it, so you're not putting in 50 hours of time to write an application for $250. You know what I mean? Yeah, it makes it a little bit easier.
I have to get ready for lunch, but I want you to know I paid attention.
I can see that. Good job.
Because now,
if you have questions or anything, just let me know. I'm always available. You can email me or call me or whatever, and I'll try to answer things. If you want me to read something, I'm happy to do that too. So I hope it was useful information.
Absolutely.